Hello, Oregon School District families. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about our fall reopening plan. For those of you who were able to join me a couple of weeks ago, this graphic should look familiar. It represents our guiding principles in the decision-making process. Of course, at the center of it are our 5 values, and the value of equity is brought to the forefront as it has been very important in this entire process. Health and safety of our students, our staff, and our community has been paramount in our thinking. We also are well aware of the mental health supports and the social emotional learning that takes place in schools and the value that schools have in both of those things. We also understand that our community expects a high quality education, and that is exactly what we intend to deliver no matter the format. We also know that throughout this process there will be needs for flexibility and adaptability. The sources of guidance list should also look familiar to the people who joined me a couple of weeks ago. However, I will highlight what has been added or what is new from our sources of guidance. For instance, Public Health of Madison and Dane County, they are currently working on metrics for the opening and closing of schools. Those metrics are not available at this recording. However, they will be influential as we move throughout the summer. It's important to note that the Center for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics have both released papers urging the safe reopening of schools. Of course, we've had considerable staff and family feedback, and I will talk about that more in just a moment. And finally, I want you to know that we have been meeting with our medical advisors. Dr. Joanna Bisgrove is the Oregon School District Medical Advisor, and I've also had the opportunity to meet with Dr. John Tempte from the Orchards Project, and both have been very helpful. Related to factors that are connected to our plan and how the plan moves forward, I want to call out one in particular, and that is the social distancing requirement. Right now, Public Health of Madison and Dane County requires 6 feet of social distancing in the schools, and that is also 6 feet with a mask. Consequently, the maximum capacity for the average classroom is 15 students. We may have the facility space in some of our schools and not at all in others, but we also know that we simply do not have enough teachers to do a 1-to-15 ratio throughout the school district. Consequently, a full attendance model right away in the fall is not feasible. However, that is our goal. Our goal is to have every one of our students in our schools. We just have to do it in a manner that is safe and cautious. So, for our feedback, I'm very grateful for the 4,279 responses we received, and there were common themes from these responses. Overall, people pointed out repeatedly that relationships and social interaction were extremely important to their students and to the learning process itself. It was also very clear that school is valued and that everyone would prefer in-person attendance if there was no virus. Everyone expressed concerns, or the vast majority of people expressed concerns about returning in person. It was also very clear that any online education moving forward must include face-to-face and must be about new learning and not just maintenance of skills, as maintenance of skills was our emphasis in the spring. It was also very clear that every child, every family, and every situation is unique, and people have varying opinions, and they're facing their own decisions related to this, and every one of those decisions is very unique. So, for the concerns related to returning to school, you'll note that the top 3 are my child catching COVID, the ability of children to appropriately social distance, and what school will be like for my child given the fact that there are considerable health and safety precautions. I apologize that my picture is covering the corner of the graphic because the corner represents the 13% of our families who responded that they have no concerns about returning to the building in the fall. However, I want to note that I completely understand that even if you are in support of full attendance, you still may have concerns. So the fact that you have concerns does not mean that you don't want your children to return to school. When we asked people what would make them feel more comfortable about returning to school, the first answer, of course, was, or the most popular answer, was having clear protocols in place if a student or a staff member is ill. Also, thorough cleaning protocols and the requirement of masks. I also want to note that, unfortunately, my picture is covering the fact that 16% of our families indicated that there is nothing that we could do that would make them feel more comfortable about sending their child into a school building this fall. We also asked people what their intentions were related to returning in the fall. 63% of our families indicated that they would go with the district implemented model, whether that was blended or virtual or full in person. 23% said that they preferred Oregon online, and 14% weren't sure. And we understand that even when you filled this out, nobody may have been 100% sure. Consequently, after this presentation, we'll offer you the opportunity to fill out a survey where you can indicate your preference. I also want to highlight the fact that throughout this decision-making process this summer, our staff members have been our partners, and we have received considerable feedback from staff. The administrative team at the district office meets weekly with the leadership team from the Oregon Education Association, which is the teachers union in Oregon. And they've been very productive, very positive meetings where we are working toward a common goal, which is the safe reopening of schools. We also sent out a survey and received 455 responses from staff members. And really the responses were reflective of the rest of society, meaning that our teachers want to be with our students, just like our parents want to have the students back in school. But the teachers are concerned about safety precautions, and similar to many of our families, they have concerns about childcare for their own children. And finally, we have been working together on many teams to design high-quality learning experiences for the fall. I would also like to point out the public health requirements and then the outcomes of those requirements. For instance, and I mentioned this previously, the requirement of 6 feet of social distancing. The outcome is that a full in-person return is not feasible until that is not a requirement. Also, public health requires a clear plan in place for staff or student illness. As a matter of fact, we cannot open until that is in place. Public health intends to provide us a template for that. It will be very clear. But one thing we know now is that there is a required 14-day quarantine for anyone who comes into close contact with someone who has COVID. Finally, a requirement is face coverings for all students and staff. That would have been a requirement in the Oregon School District, even if public health had not required it, and it is a very firm expectation for all. In addition, we are required to have written cleaning and safety protocols, which of course we will have, and once again, public health has provided excellent templates. And the result of this is that there are enhanced cleaning protocols. And finally, we are asked to use cohort grouping as much as possible when we do bring students into the building. And what that does is it keeps the number of students who are together in a day very small, which is a safer practice for all and allows for more efficient contact tracing. So now I will talk a little bit about our phased reopening plan. I want to point out to you that while we have made a decision related to the fall, we understand that all plans are subject to public health of Madison and Dane County data. So while we know what we're going to do at the moment, there are things that could change if the data gets worse or if the data gets better. So here's what we're referring to as our fall 2020 approach. Parents really have two choices. And the first is what we are referring to as the Oregon Phased Restart, which means that Oregon School District will start virtually. However, as part of this phased restart, it is our goal to bring in small in-person groups of students in 4K through grade 4 and small in-person groups for students with specific needs, such as critical IEP needs or mental health support needs, etc. That's where we're starting. And once that happens, and that happens safely, our plan is to continue to increase the number of students that we are bringing into the building. And all of that will be reassessed based on health metrics. The choice parents have is to go with the Oregon Phased Restart or the Oregon Online program, which is fully online, not coming into the building for any reason, and making that choice for at least one semester. I will give you information on both of these options so that at the end of the presentation, you will have a good idea which works best for your family. For the Oregon Phased Restart, I want to point out that the first day of school is scheduled to be September 1st. However, that first week, September 1st through 5th, we intend to use that time for what you may have heard of referred to in the past as Ready, Set, Go conferences. But what that means is students and families meeting with teachers, beginning the relationship building process, not assessment or anything of that nature, just getting to know one another. It's really important that our youngest students know who their teachers are and begin to form a connection. Our goal, if public health data is positive, is that those will be in-person meetings that occur, for the most part, outdoors, because we know that is safest. However, if the metrics do not allow that to happen, those would be virtual conferences. We also plan to use that particular week for teacher prep and training. And I know that you may think, well, why weren't you doing that in August? And I would say, believe me, teachers are doing it in August. However, we felt it was important to give them more paid time to do all that is necessary to ensure the highest quality virtual experience. And then on September 8th, that's when online instruction will begin for our youngest learners, 4K to grade 4. And during those first 2 weeks, that is the time period in which it is our goal to bring in small in-person groups. When I say small, I mean every child coming in, but only coming in groups of 4 to 6 students at a time for a short 2-hour period. And I will give you more information on that in a moment. But it would be the beginning of bringing our students into our schools. And then on October 5th, which will be 6 weeks into the school year, we'll be reassessing again. Are we able to bring in more students and do it safely? You'll notice on the bottom of this slide, Oregon Online also has Ready, Set, Go conferences, but they would be virtual. And online instruction for them begins the same day, September 8th, but there is not the option of small in-person groups. For grades 5 through 6, please note that once again, we're hoping for the Ready, Set, Go conferences. And again, we hope that they are in person, and that depends on what's happening with our numbers in Dane County. But if they are not in person and outdoors, then they would be virtual. And grades 5 and 6 would start their online instruction on September 8th. But for grades 5 and 6, we are not bringing in every student in a small group. Instead, we're bringing in small groups for students that need additional supports for specific purposes. However, by mid-October, we will be evaluating public health data, and if we are able to, we will start to bring in those small groups of 5th and 6th graders into the school building. This is a phased approach because we want to move slowly, learn as we go, and ensure that we don't have to close the schools because we did something too quickly. We want to be cautious and thoughtful with the goal of everyone in the school building. For grades 7 through 12, we also hope to be able to have some beginning of the year conferences. Online instruction begins September 8th, and the approach is very similar to grades 5 and 6, other than we will be evaluating in mid-October for what changes need to happen for second quarter. And second quarter happens in the beginning of November. And the reason we would be evaluating in mid-October is we really want to give people a couple of weeks. If we plan to make changes to how we are delivering services, we want to give people at least 2 weeks of notice. So for our parents of students in kindergarten through grade 4, what would these small in-person groups look like? Please note I don't have 4K on this slide. 4K will receive information at a later date because their small groups, due to the structure of the 4K programs, would look slightly different. First of all, we would be following all health and safety guidance. There would be absolutely no cutting of corners and no compromises on health and safety. Our students would be assigned into groups of 4 to 6 to be with their singular teacher, their classroom teacher, because we do plan to minimize the number of adults our students are interacting with when they are in the school building. It is our goal to have family members all be assigned to the same day, and the day would be for 2 hours, one afternoon each week. We would plan to be outdoors as much as possible because we know that's the safest for now. And the focus would be on relationships and social emotional learning. And of course, as time goes on, we would be increasing the academics that are offered during those 2 hours. But we know what is important is building that relationship that will serve as the foundation for the online learning that is happening during the mornings. We also know that we would be working on helping students understand what socially distanced means, and that masks would be required. We would also have clear protocols for handling illness, and transportation will be available. So we know that about a third of our families, if they're coming back to school, plan on using school transportation. And for these 2 hours, one afternoon a week, we would have buses available to pick your children up, take them to school, and pick them up at school and take them home. So our buses will be running fairly continuously to ensure that we are getting our students where they need to go. Now, for online instruction, we'll take a little bit of time to talk about what worked well in the spring and what families told us they need. We know that flexibility and working at one's own pace worked well. We know that staff office hours were important to people, and it was important that our teachers were available. We also heard that the Friday catch-up days for catch-up and review, that was important to people. So in the upcoming school year, Wednesdays are the independent online learning days for students to review materials and get work done. And for teachers, it will be a professional collaboration day. What we're offering this fall will require just as much collaboration as ever, perhaps more. And that's why we wanted to make sure we were giving teachers the time to make that happen. We selected Wednesdays as if we move to a blended option in the future, Wednesdays would be the deep cleaning days between cohorts. We also know that other school districts have selected Wednesdays, and that may make some things easier for those of you who work in other districts or for our teachers who live in other districts and are working on childcare issues. Our families told us they needed certain things in order to have a successful virtual learning experience, and we absolutely listened. We know that we need more face-to-face interaction between the students and the teacher, and between the students. We also know that there needs to be new content and new learning and not just maintenance of skills. We heard you when you said we needed consistent formats and organizations, and also how important the supports were to ensure that learning is happening. So, whether you choose Oregon Online or the Oregon Phased Restart, here are some things that will be common in the online learning experience. There will be Oregon School District teachers who know our district and who know many of our families who are teaching courses in both choices. The curriculum is based on the same grade level standards and will be consistent. So what you're experiencing in Oregon Online will be consistent with what students are experiencing in the Oregon Phased Restart. We will still be aligned with our values. We will have considerably more face-to-face time and real-time interaction. We will have a manageable number of classes at one time. For example, it would be very difficult for a high school student to manage 8 classes virtually. Consequently, we are making adjustments to our schedules to ensure that students really have about 4 classes at a time. That will make things much better, and we are not limiting the number of classes students may participate in throughout the course of the year, just how many they have at one single time. We will have more check-ins to engage our students and to provide supports. We are planning on resuming our historical grading practices, perhaps with some changes due to the situation. And we will be providing consistent format and organization. Google Classroom will be the consistent format, except for the youngest grades, where they will be utilizing Seesaw. Another thing that will be different from the spring is that there will be facility access. The buildings in the spring were closed per public order. However, in the fall, our buildings will be open for staff workspace. Staff will be able to utilize our buildings and all the materials in our buildings, and we know that that will result in an even higher quality experience than what they were able to provide this spring. We also will have our buildings open for invited small student groups, so we will schedule them out and we will let you know when they are necessary. Students will be expected to be dropped off and picked up outdoors only. Parents will not be able to come into the building as we are not open for visitors or volunteers, and that is a part of our safety efforts, minimizing the number of adults our students are coming into contact with when they are on school grounds. For our school nutrition program, of course, we're committed to safely feeding our students when we're able to have them in school for a lunchtime. And we will closely follow all federal and state allowances for students during any online learning model. And we will work with DPI regulations to continue to feed students in our community. There were restrictions were lifted last spring and this summer that allowed us to do much more. And we're hoping that that happens again in the fall, because we know how important it is to provide food for families throughout this time period. And as far as next steps, so in the email that contained the link to this particular presentation, there's also a link to a Google form where you will be able to select between the Oregon Phased Restart or the Oregon Online program. And then we ask that you make that selection by Tuesday, August 4th, because after those selections are made, that's when we will work on which teachers are teaching Oregon Online, which ones are part of the phased restart. So we need that information to come in fairly soon. We will also continue to communicate with you on a very regular basis. We will send weekly updates on topics that we know are important to you, such as teacher assignments or small groups and when they're coming in. Before I conclude, I want to take a moment to thank everyone. I want to thank the community, because the type of input that we're getting has been gracious and kind and thoughtful regarding other people and other people's experiences. People most of the time are emailing me to advocate for others, and I really find that to be representational of the type of community Oregon is. So thank you for that. I also want to thank our school board for their support throughout the entire public health crisis. I want to thank our educational staff, because we couldn't ask for better partners in working to make sure we're providing a high quality education and moving towards a full reopen of our schools. Personally, I would also like to thank the administrative team, because to a person, they have been team members that really are completely irreplaceable. So thank you. Now, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to get all of the information that you need. So on the screen, you will see the email address for any questions that you want to send in. We want to have them kept in a central place to allow for as rapid a response as possible. Also, you'll see the phone number for the front desk of the district office. That is a phone that is monitored frequently, so that we'll be able to return your messages quite quickly. And on the very top is the website address, where you'll be able to see all of the recordings that have been happening over the last few weeks, so that you can go back and review anything as it becomes necessary. So I want to thank you. We really appreciate the time you took to watch this rather lengthy presentation, and we look forward to serving your students in the fall.